Good evening. Perhaps you are lying here tonight after a day when nothing went quite as planned. When you tried your best but still fell short. When you looked around and everyone else seemed more capable, more accomplished, more worthy. Tonight we explore humility and modesty, qualities that the Buddhist tradition teaches are not weakness, but the very foundation of wisdom itself. If you'd like, let us know where in the world you're joining from tonight. Through 20 stories from mountain monasteries and humble villages, we'll discover that true strength flows not from elevating ourselves above others, but from lowering ourselves enough to learn from everyone we meet. Take a deep breath. Feel your body beginning to settle into the bed beneath you. Let your shoulders release any tightness they've been holding. You may be here because your pride was wounded today, because someone criticized you, because you made a mistake and feel small. These teachings speak directly to that tender place. For over 2,000 years, Buddhist masters across Japan, China, Tibet, and Vietnam have understood that the path to genuine confidence begins with humble acknowledgement of how much we don't know. Let yourself rest now. Let these ancient stories carry you gently. You are safe here. Sleep will come as we journey together through this wisdom. There was once a famous scholar who had studied Buddhist texts for 30 years. His shelves overflowed with books. His mind brimmed with knowledge. When he heard of a Zen master living in a simple temple 2 days' journey away, he decided to pay the master a visit. He arrived at the temple gate with confidence in his step. This would be an interesting conversation between equals, he thought. The master greeted him without ceremony, gesturing to a low table where a tea set waited. They sat facing each other on worn cushions that had held countless visitors before. The scholar immediately began talking. He spoke of the sutras he had mastered, the commentaries he had written, the philosophical debates he had won. He quoted from memory passages from texts the master might not have encountered. His words flowed without pause, each sentence demonstrating the depth of his learning. The master listened in silence, his face calm and unreadable. After some time, he lifted the teapot and began to pour tea into the scholar's cup. The golden liquid filled the cup slowly. The scholar continued talking, barely noticing. The tea reached the rim of the cup. Still the master poured. The tea spilled over the edge, pooling on the tray beneath. It overflowed onto the table. The scholar stopped mid-sentence, watching the tea spread across the wood. "Master, the cup is full. No more will go in." The master set down the teapot and looked at him directly for the first time. "Like this cup," he said quietly, "you are full of your own opinions and knowledge. How can I show you anything when there is no room left in you to receive it? Until you empty your cup, you cannot taste the tea I offer." The scholar felt heat rise to his face. In that moment, he saw himself clearly. For 30 years he had been collecting knowledge the way a child collects stones, piling them higher and higher, building walls that kept out the very wisdom he sought. His learning had become armor protecting him from the vulnerability of not knowing. His expertise had become a throne, elevating him above the possibility of being taught. He set down his own cup carefully. "Master," he said, and his voice was different now, smaller. "I have been a fool. Please teach me how to empty my cup." The master smiled then, a warmth spreading across his weathered face. "You have just begun," he said. "The first teaching is always the same. Come as you are, but bring nothing with you. This story reminds us that knowledge without humility becomes a cage. We spend years accumulating degrees, titles, expertise, certain that mastery means having all the answers. We walk into rooms announcing our credentials before our names. We interrupt others to correct them, to show we already know what they're trying to say. We treat conversations as competitions to be won, rather than opportunities to learn something new. Consider how this appears in our daily lives. When your younger colleague suggests a different approach to a project, and your first instinct is to explain why your way is better because you have more experience. When someone offers feedback, and you immediately defend yourself, listing all the reasons they don't understand the full situation. When you find yourself saying "I know" before the other person has finished their sentence. In each moment, your cup is already full. Nothing new can enter. The scholar in this story had genuine knowledge. His 30 years of study were not wasted, but his learning had calcified into pride. He had forgotten that true mastery begins with acknowledging how much remains unknown. The greatest teachers are often those who say most readily, "I don't know," or "Please, tell me more," or "Help me understand." The master didn't refuse to teach because the scholar was ignorant. He waited because the scholar was not yet teachable. Pride creates deafness. When we believe we already know, we stop listening. We hear the words but filter them through our existing beliefs, looking for confirmation rather than challenge. The humble mind remains porous, allowing new understanding to seep in. What would change if you approached each conversation as if the other person might know something essential that you don't? If you entered each meeting assuming you have something to learn? If you met criticism not with defensiveness but with curiosity, thinking perhaps they see something I cannot see from where I stand? This is not self-diminishment. This is wisdom. This is the empty cup that can be filled with tea. Breathe slowly now. Feel your mind becoming quieter. In this darkness, there is no need to prove anything. No need to be the expert. No need to already know. Just rest. Just listen. Let yourself be empty enough to receive what comes next. A young monk arrived at a mountain monastery burning with ambition. He wanted to be enlightened. He wanted to be great. He practiced meditation with fierce determination, sitting longer than anyone else, rising earlier, sleeping less. After 6 months, he approached his teacher with frustration painted across his face. "Master, I have tried so hard. I meditate for hours. I follow every rule perfectly. Yet enlightenment does not come. What am I doing wrong?" The master looked at him thoughtfully. "Come with me," he said. He led the young monk to the monastery kitchen, where an old monk was washing dishes. The man's robes were simple and patched. His hands moved through the soapy water with patient attention, cleaning each bowl as if it were a sacred object. "This is Brother Chen," the master said. "He has been washing dishes here for 40 years. The young monk glanced at Brother Chen and looked away, disappointed. This was not the kind of teacher he sought. No profound words. No dramatic enlightenment stories. Just an old man with dishwater on his sleeves. Over the following weeks, something began to shift in the young monk's awareness. He noticed Brother Chen in ways he hadn't before. How the old monk bowed to the vegetables before chopping them. How he swept the floor as if dancing a slow meditation. How he smiled at the novices who considered kitchen duty beneath them. One morning, The young monk was assigned to help in the kitchen. He stood beside Brother Chen at the washing basin. "How do you stay so peaceful?" he asked. "Don't you want more than this? Don't you wish you could be studying with the master instead of washing dishes?" Brother Chen continued his work, his hands steady in the water. "Every bowl I wash," he said, "teaches me something I didn't know. This morning, this bowl showed me that I was rushing. I was thinking about the next bowl before I had finished cleaning this one. So the bowl reminded me to be here, now, fully." The young monk looked at the ordinary ceramic bowls stacked on the shelf. "But you're just washing dishes," he said. "Anyone can do this." Brother Chen smiled. "Yes," he said. "That's exactly the point. This practice is so simple that my pride cannot survive it. I cannot be proud of washing a bowl. I cannot seek recognition for sweeping a floor. So these ordinary tasks keep me humble. They remind me daily that I am not special. And in that ordinariness, I am free." The young monk felt something crack open inside his chest. He had been seeking to become someone important, someone worthy of respect, someone enlightened. Brother Chen had released the need to be anyone at all. "The master sent you to me," the young monk said, understanding dawning. "Yes," Brother Chen replied. "He knew you needed to learn what books cannot teach. That the lowest work often holds the highest wisdom. That true practice is not about becoming great, but about becoming willing to be small." This teaching shows us that spiritual pride is perhaps the most dangerous kind. We can be humble about our wealth, our appearance, our talents, and still carry enormous pride about our spiritual attainment. We meditate and then feel superior to those who don't. We practice compassion and then judge those we deem less compassionate. We study wisdom and then use it to feel smarter than others. This is pride wearing the mask of humility. The young monk wanted enlightenment the way we want promotions or recognition. He saw it as an achievement that would elevate him. Brother Chen understood that true spiritual growth requires the opposite movement. Not climbing up, but descending down. Not becoming more, but becoming less. Not accumulating spiritual merit like gold coins, but emptying ourselves of the very desire for specialness. Think about your own spiritual or personal growth journey. Do you compare yourself to others, measuring who is more advanced? When you practice meditation or mindfulness, does part of you feel proud that you're doing something worthwhile while others waste their lives on trivial pursuits? When you make progress, do you want recognition for it? These are natural impulses, but they are also signs that pride has infiltrated even our most sacred practices. The ordinary tasks Brother Chen performed were not punishment or waste. They were medicine for ego. When you wash dishes, no one applauds. When you sweep floors, no one writes articles about your spiritual depth. When you do simple work with full attention, you practice for its own sake, not for the approval it might bring. This is freedom. This is what the young monk was seeking without knowing it. In our lives, we often avoid work we consider beneath us. We delegate it. We rush through it. We do it with resentment, thinking we should be doing something more important. But what if the most important work is whatever is right in front of us? What if washing the dishes mindfully is more valuable than meditating while secretly hoping for enlightenment? What if the path to wisdom begins not with doing extraordinary things, but with doing ordinary things without needing them to make us feel extraordinary? Let your breathing be soft and natural now. Feel your body sinking deeper into rest. There is no achievement to pursue here. No status to attain. Just this breath. Just this moment. Just this simple act of being alive without needing it to mean anything more. In a village at the base of a mountain, there lived a potter named Wei who made simple clay bowls. His bowls were not particularly beautiful. They were not famous. But they were well made, sturdy, useful. Wei lived alone in a small house, his days spent at the wheel, his nights spent in quiet rest. One day, a wealthy merchant traveled through the village seeking the potter whose work he had heard about. He entered Wei's humble workshop and looked around with barely concealed disappointment. The space was plain. The pottery was undecorated. The potter himself wore rough clothes and had clay under his fingernails. I was told there was a master potter in this village, the merchant said. Can you direct me to his workshop? Wei looked up from the bowl he was shaping, his hands still moving in their practiced rhythm. You are standing in the only pottery workshop in this village, he said. If you seek a master, I'm afraid I cannot help you. I am simply someone who makes bowls. The merchant frowned. But I heard that the potter here studied with the imperial potter himself, that his teacher was the greatest in all the provinces. That is true, Wei said. I was fortunate to study with Master Chen for 7 years. He taught me everything I know. The merchant's interest sparked again. Then you are a master yourself. Why do you hide in this small village making plain bowls when you could be making fine pottery for the emperor? Wei's hands slowed on the wheel. He looked at the simple bowl taking shape beneath his fingers. When I studied with Master Chen, I was young and ambitious, like you suggest. I dreamed of creating the most beautiful pottery in the land. I wanted my name to be known. I wanted to be called a master. He paused, centering the clay that had begun to wobble. One day, Master Chen called me to his workshop. He showed me 2 bowls. One was magnificent, decorated with glazes that seemed to hold sunrise and sunset. The other was plain, unadorned, the color of earth. He asked me which was more valuable. I chose the decorated bowl without hesitation. Master Chen nodded and then filled both bowls with water. He drank from the plain bowl. The water tasted pure, clean, perfect. Then he drank from the beautiful bowl. The glaze had been improperly fired. The water tasted bitter. Metallic beauty that serves no one is merely vanity, Master Chen said. A plain bowl that holds water clean and gives it freely is worth more than the most decorated bowl that makes the water bitter. Wei removed the bowl from the wheel, setting it gently aside to dry. From that day, I understood. My skill is not mine to hoard or use for fame. It is a gift meant to be given in service. So I make bowls. Simple bowls that help people eat. That's enough. That's everything. The merchant stood silent for a long moment. Then he bowed deeply, lower than his status required. Forgive me, he said. I came seeking a master and found one, though not in the way I expected. Wei shook his head gently. No, master. Just a potter. Just someone trying to make useful bowls. Nothing more. But the merchant understood, as we are meant to understand, that this was exactly what mastery looked like when it had been washed clean of pride. This story teaches us that humility knows the difference between skill and superiority. Wei possessed genuine mastery. His years of study had given him knowledge and ability that few possessed. But he did not confuse excellence with elevation. He did not believe that being good at something made him better than others. His skill was simply a tool for service, not a pedestal to stand on. We live in a culture that constantly asks, what makes you special? What sets you apart? How are you different from everyone else? We are taught to distinguish ourselves, to stand out, to be remarkable. And there's nothing wrong with developing our abilities. But when our accomplishments become the foundation of our worth, when our skills become evidence of our superiority, we have lost something essential. Think about moments when you felt proud of something you accomplished. That warm glow of achievement. Now notice if that pride required someone else to be less. Did you feel good because you were better than others? Did your success taste sweeter because someone else failed? This is the pride that poisons. True confidence needs no comparison. It simply is. Wei could have opened a prestigious studio in the capital. He could have charged premium prices. He could have made his name synonymous with excellence. But he understood that fame is just another form of decoration. Beautiful, perhaps, but often making the water of life taste bitter. He chose usefulness over recognition, service over status, being helpful over being celebrated. How different would your work feel if you approached it this way? If you did excellent work not to be praised but simply because the work itself deserves your best effort. If you developed your skills not to elevate yourself above others but to be more useful to those around you. If your goal was not to be recognized as the best, but to make whatever you touch a little better for the people who encounter it. The merchant came seeking someone impressive and found someone who had learned to be content with being ordinary. This is not settling for less. This is understanding what actually matters. A plain bowl that holds clean water serves the world better than a decorated vase that holds only dust and admiration. Rest your mind now. Feel how tiring it is to constantly prove yourself. How exhausting it becomes to maintain the image of being special. In this quiet darkness, you can let that weight fall away. You can be ordinary. You can be simple. You can be enough exactly as you are, without any decoration or distinction at all. A famous teacher traveled from temple to temple giving lectures on Buddhist philosophy. Her talks were brilliant, her knowledge vast, her words praised wherever she went. Monks and lay people alike would gather to hear her speak, filling the halls beyond capacity. She knew she was gifted. She knew she was special. And though she would never say it aloud, she carried this knowledge like a lamp she held above others, illuminating her own importance. One winter, her travels brought her to a small monastery deep in the mountains. The journey had been difficult. Snow covered the paths. The cold bit through her robes. She arrived exhausted and irritable, expecting to be greeted with the respect she had grown accustomed to. Instead, an old nun answered the door. She was tiny, bent with age, her face creased like ancient paper. "Yes," the old nun said, neither welcoming nor unwelcoming. "I am Teacher Ming," she announced. "I was invited to give a series of lectures here." The old nun nodded. "We've been expecting you. You'll sleep in the guest room. Dinner is at sunset. Please wash your bowl after eating." That was all. No honored greeting. No special accommodations. No recognition of her status. Teacher Ming felt a flash of irritation, but swallowed it. Perhaps they didn't realize who she was. That evening in the dining hall, she sat among the other residents. The old nun who had greeted her served the food with slow, arthritic movements. Teacher Ming noticed that everyone waited until the old nun sat before beginning to eat. "Is she the abbot?" Teacher Ming whispered to the young monk beside her. "Sister May." "No," he replied. "She is our eldest resident. She has lived here for 60 years. We honor her longevity and her practice." After the meal, Teacher Ming started to stand, ready to leave her bowl for others to wash, as was her custom when visiting temples. But she remembered the old nun's words. She washed her bowl herself, feeling oddly rebellious, as if she were doing work beneath her station. Over the following days, her lectures drew good attendance. People listened respectfully. But she noticed something. The old nun, Sister May, never came to hear her speak. This bothered Teacher Ming more than she wanted to admit. Did the old woman not recognize the value of what was being offered? Did she think herself too wise to learn from Teacher Ming's teachings? On the fourth day, Teacher Ming found Sister May in the garden, moving between winter vegetables with patient attention. "Sister May," she said, keeping her voice carefully neutral, "I've noticed you haven't attended any of my lectures. Is Buddhist philosophy not of interest to you?" Sister May looked up, her eyes clear despite her age. "I have great interest in Buddhist philosophy," she said. "I have studied it for many decades. Then why not come listen to my teachings?" Teacher Ming asked, unable to hide her irritation now. "I have traveled very far to share this wisdom." Sister May straightened slowly, meeting Teacher Ming's eyes with unexpected directness. "I have listened," she said. "Each morning, I listen to how you speak to the novices who serve your breakfast. Each afternoon, I listen to how you respond when someone asks you to repeat something you've already explained. Each evening, I listen to the tone you use with those you consider less learned than yourself." She paused, her weathered hands still holding a carrot pulled from the frozen earth. "Your words are beautiful, Teacher Ming. But your presence teaches something different than your lectures. And I have found that what a teacher does speaks louder than what a teacher says." Teacher Ming felt as if the ground had opened beneath her feet. She saw herself suddenly through Sister May's eyes. How she had spoken impatiently to the young monk who served her tea. How she had corrected others with barely concealed condescension. How she carried herself with an air of superiority, even as her mouth formed words about compassion and humility. "I thought I was humble," she said, and her voice cracked on the words. "I teach humility. I speak of it beautifully. But I don't actually practice it. Do I?" Sister May's expression softened. "We often teach what we most need to learn," she said. "Your words are not false. But perhaps they have not yet traveled the distance from your mind to your hands, from your mouth to your feet, from your ideas to your actions. That is a journey we all must make. Some of us are still walking it after 60 years. This story reveals that humility is not something we discuss or understand intellectually. It is something we embody in every interaction, every moment, every small gesture that no one else notices." Teacher Ming had mastered the philosophy of humility without learning to actually be humble. She could explain it brilliantly while simultaneously elevating herself above everyone around her. Consider how often we do this. We talk about the importance of equality while treating service workers as invisible. We preach about compassion while speaking harshly to family members who inconvenience us. We teach about mindfulness while impatiently interrupting others. We understand humility as a concept while carrying ourselves with subtle superiority. The gap between what we profess and how we actually live can be vast. Sister May's wisdom was not in her words but in her attention. She didn't need to attend lectures to understand Teacher Ming. She simply watched how Teacher Ming moved through the world when she thought no one important was looking. She saw how Teacher Ming treated those she considered beneath her notice. She observed the small moments that revealed true character. What would people learn about you if they paid attention not to what you say but to how you actually behave? When you're tired or frustrated, how do you speak to the person at the checkout counter? When someone asks what you consider an obvious question, does your tone carry patience or barely concealed contempt? When someone disagrees with you, do you listen with genuine openness, or do you wait for them to stop talking so you can explain why they're wrong? These moments are the real teachings we offer to the world. The journey from mind to hands, from mouth to feet, from ideas to actions. This is the work. This is where humility actually lives. Not in beautiful philosophy, but in the ordinary moments when we choose to treat all people with equal respect. When we serve without needing recognition. When we learn from everyone, not just those we deem wise. Breathe deeply now. Feel your body completely supported by the bed. You don't need to be impressive tonight. You don't need to be wise or enlightened or special. You can simply be human, flawed, learning, making the slow journey from knowing about humility to actually living it. That's enough. Rest now. There was once a monastery where 7 monks lived together in practice. 6 of them were scholarly, well-spoken, learned in scripture and philosophy. The 7th, Brother Lin, had never learned to read. He had come to the monastery as a boy, fleeing a difficult home. The abbot had accepted him despite his lack of education, seeing something in the child's eyes that spoke of natural wisdom. Now, 30 years later, Brother Lin still could not read the sutras. While others studied and debated, he worked. He tended the garden. He repaired broken tools. He fixed the roof when it leaked. He cooked meals when the cook fell ill. He did whatever needed doing without being asked, without complaint, without ever drawing attention to his contributions. The scholarly monks appreciated his work but considered him simple, kind but unlearned, useful but not truly walking the spiritual path they walked. One day, a renowned Zen master came to visit the monastery. The 6 scholars prepared extensively, hoping to impress him with their understanding. They cleaned the meditation hall until it shone. They arranged their insights like jewelry to be displayed. When the master arrived, the abbot invited all 7 monks to sit with their visitor. The scholars sat eagerly, ready to demonstrate their knowledge. Brother Lin sat quietly in the back, his rough hands folded in his lap. The Zen master looked around the room. "I would like to hear from each of you," he said. "Tell me what you have learned from your practice." The first scholar spoke eloquently about non-attachment. The second explained the doctrine of emptiness with impressive precision. The third quoted sutras from memory. The fourth described his meditation experiences. The fifth discussed the nature of consciousness. The sixth outlined the path to enlightenment with scholarly thoroughness. Then all eyes turned to Brother Lin. He shifted uncomfortably. "I have nothing to say," he murmured. "I cannot read the sutras. I don't know the teachings they speak of." The scholars waited, some with barely hidden smiles. Here was proof of what they had always known. Brother Lin lacked the intellectual capacity for true spiritual understanding. The Zen master leaned forward. "But what have you learned from your life here?" he asked gently. Brother Lin was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke slowly, carefully, as if pulling water from a deep well. "I've learned that when I fix a tool, I learn patience. The tool teaches me to pay attention to what is broken. I have learned that when I tend the garden, the plants teach me that growth cannot be forced. I have learned that when I cook, the rice teaches me that it will burn if I am not present. I have learned that when I am angry, the anger hurts me more than anyone else, so I must let it go, like putting down a heavy stone. I have learned that when I am proud, I stop seeing the people around me clearly, so I must bow low to see them again." He paused, looking embarrassed. "These are simple things, nothing like what my brothers have learned from the sutras, but they are what my life has taught me." The room fell silent. Then the Zen master began to laugh, not mockingly, but with genuine joy. "My friends," he said to the scholarly monks, "this one understands. He has learned not from books, but from life itself. He has learned not through his mind, but through his hands and his heart. He cannot quote the Buddha, but he lives as the Buddha taught. Is this not the truest wisdom?" The scholars sat in stunned silence. They had spent decades studying texts, memorizing teachings, debating philosophy. And here was Brother Lin, whom they had dismissed as simple, demonstrating understanding that their book learning had never given them. "The ability to read is a gift," the master continued. "Knowledge is valuable, but wisdom comes not from knowing about the teachings, but from living them. And often, those who have the humility to learn from ordinary life, rather than only from extraordinary texts, develop a deeper understanding than those who pride themselves on their scholarship." After the master left, the monastery was different. The scholars began to pay attention to Brother Lin in new ways. They noticed how he moved through tasks with complete presence, how he treated broken tools with the same care he treated sacred objects, how he never spoke of his contributions but simply did what was needed. And slowly, they began to understand that they had been living with a teacher all along, someone who taught not through words but through the quiet example of a humble, attentive life. This story shows us that wisdom is not the exclusive possession of the educated. The scholars had confused knowledge with understanding, information with transformation. They could explain Buddhist teachings brilliantly, but Brother Lin lived them daily in ways they did not. He had learned humility not as a concept, but as a practice, woven into every action. We live in a world that equates intelligence with worth, education with value, credentials with credibility. We are impressed by people who can speak eloquently, who have prestigious degrees, who can reference important thinkers. And education is valuable. Knowledge matters. But it is not the only path to wisdom. Sometimes the most profound teachers are those who never wrote a book, never gave a lecture, never accumulated any of the markers we use to identify expertise. Think about the people in your life who taught you the most important lessons. Were they always the most educated? Or were some of them ordinary people who showed you through their example what it means to live with integrity? The grandmother who demonstrated patience through her daily care. The janitor who taught you dignity through how he treated his work. The friend with no formal education who understood human nature better than any psychologist. Brother Lin's humility came partly from necessity. He couldn't compete on the scholarly monk's terms. He had no choice but to find value in ordinary tasks and simple presence. But rather than resenting this limitation, he transformed it into a doorway. His inability to read the sutras forced him to read life itself with extraordinary attention. His lack of verbal skill taught him to speak through actions. His exclusion from scholarly debates freed him to practice rather than theorize. What limitations in your own life might actually be invitations? What things you cannot do might be forcing you toward what you most need to learn? If you can't be the smartest person in the room, perhaps you're being taught to listen more carefully. If you don't have the most prestigious position, perhaps you're being shown that your worth doesn't depend on status. If you lack certain skills or knowledge, perhaps you're learning that there are other forms of wisdom equally valuable. The scholars learned an essential lesson that day. They learned to look for teachers in unexpected places, to value different forms of wisdom, to respect those they had previously dismissed. Most importantly, they learned that humility means remaining teachable no matter how much you already know. That the moment you decide you're to learn from someone simple, you have revealed how little you truly understand. Let your mind rest now in this soft darkness. There is no test to pass here, no knowledge to prove. Just the simple act of breathing, of being, of allowing yourself to be taught by this very moment, by your body's wisdom, by the darkness that holds you. Nothing more is needed. Sleep is coming. In ancient times, there lived a monk named Hakuin who was famous throughout the province for his wisdom and virtue. People came from distant villages seeking his guidance. His reputation was spotless, his character beyond reproach. He wore this honor like invisible armor, protecting the image of himself he had carefully constructed. One day, a young woman from the village became pregnant. When her angry parents demanded to know who the father was, she named Hakuin. The accusation spread like fire through dry grass. People who had revered him now spat when they spoke his name. Disciples who had bowed to him turned away in disgust. His reputation, built over decades, crumbled in a single day. When the woman's parents brought the newborn baby to Hakuin's door, he received the child with 4 simple words. "Is that so?" he said. Nothing more. No protests of innocence. No attempts to defend himself. No desperate explanations. Just those 4 words. And then he took the infant into his care. For months, Hakuin raised the child. He begged for milk from neighbors who cursed him. He washed soiled cloths in the stream while people threw stones. He walked through the village with the baby strapped to his back, while former students looked through him as if he were invisible. Not once did he defend himself. Not once did he proclaim his innocence. He simply cared for the child with patient attention, accepting the consequences of a crime he did not commit. A year passed. The young woman's guilt grew unbearable. Finally, she confessed to her parents that the real father was a young man from a neighboring village. She had been afraid to name him, afraid of her parents' reaction, so she had chosen Hakuin, knowing his reputation would make her story believable. When her parents rushed to Hakuin's temple with profuse apologies, he received their words with the same 4 words he had spoken before. "Is that so?" he said. He handed them the baby, clean and healthy and well cared for, and returned to his meditation as if nothing of importance had occurred. The story spread. But now people spoke of it with awe rather than contempt. They could not understand how a person could endure such false accusation without defending himself. How he could care for a child while his reputation was destroyed and never speak a word of protest. How he could give up the baby with the same equanimity he had received it. When students asked him about it years later, he was reluctant to discuss it. Finally, he said only this: "I had built my spiritual practice on my reputation. I was proud of being known as wise and pure. When that reputation was taken away, I had to discover if anything real remained underneath. The false accusation was a great gift. It burned away the pride I didn't know I was carrying. It showed me I had been attached to being seen as virtuous rather than actually being free." Someone asked if he had been angry at the young woman who lied about him. He smiled slightly. "She gave me the greatest teaching. She showed me that I cared more about what people thought of me than about truth itself. If I had been truly humble, I would have felt no need to defend my reputation. I would have known that my worth was not determined by others' opinions. She forced me to learn this, not as philosophy, but as lived experience. For that, I am grateful." This teaching cuts to the heart of what humility really means. It's easy to practice humility when people respect us. It's simple to be modest when our reputation is secure. But true humility reveals itself when we are falsely accused, when our name is dragged through mud, when the image we have carefully constructed is destroyed and we are powerless to save it. Hakuin discovered that he had been attached to being seen as humble. His modesty had been another form of pride. He wanted to be known as the monk who transcended ego, which meant his ego was still very much in charge, just wearing different clothes. The false accusation stripped away this pretense. When his reputation was destroyed, he had to face whether his spiritual practice had any substance beyond the approval he received. Think about your own attachment to reputation. How much of your self-worth depends on what others think of you? When someone criticizes you, how quickly do you rush to defend yourself? When someone misunderstands your intentions, how desperately do you need them to know the truth? When you're falsely accused of something, how much energy do you spend trying to clear your name? Hakuin's "Is that so?" is one of the most profound responses in Buddhist literature. It's not passive or defeated. It's not martyrdom or self-hatred. It's complete freedom from needing others to see him a certain way. Whether they think he's a saint or a scoundrel, it doesn't change who he actually is. Their opinions, whether praise or condemnation, are just opinions. Just weather passing through, just sounds in the air. This doesn't mean we never defend ourselves when falsely accused. Sometimes speaking truth is important, especially when our silence might harm others. But the question is, why are we defending ourselves? Is it to protect others from deception? Or is it to protect our image, our pride, our need to be seen as good? The motivation matters more than the action. What if you could care for your reputation the way Hakuin cared for that baby? Gently, patiently, without clutching. What if you could let go of needing to be understood, needing to be seen as right, needing to be appreciated for your true intentions? What freedom might live on the other side of that release? Breathe softly. Let your chest rise and fall without effort. You don't need to defend yourself here in this darkness. No one is watching. No one is judging. You can let down the careful image you maintain. You can rest without pretense. Just be. Just breathe. Let reputation and recognition fall away like clothes you no longer need to wear. There was a great artist named Shen who painted landscapes so beautiful that collectors fought for his work. Emperors commissioned his paintings. Scholars wrote poems about them. His fame spread across provinces. He was celebrated, wealthy, sought after, and somewhere beneath his humility, which he performed flawlessly, pride had taken root like a weed in a well-tended garden. One day, while traveling through a remote mountain village, Shen stopped at a small tea house to rest. An old woman served him, her hands gnarled with age, her movements slow and careful. On the wall hung a painting. It was amateurish, technically flawed, the proportions wrong, the brushwork clumsy. But something about it stopped Shen. The painting showed a simple persimmon tree with 3 fruits hanging from a branch. Despite its technical failures, the painting conveyed something he had never managed to capture in his acclaimed works. A sense of being present with the tree, of loving it not for its beauty but for its essence. "Who painted this?" he asked the old woman. "My son," she said, pride warming her voice. He had no training, but he loved to paint. He died 20 years ago. This is all I have left of him. Shen looked at the painting again. All his celebrated landscapes suddenly seemed empty, technically perfect, but spiritually hollow. He had painted to impress. Her son had painted to express love. "It's beautiful," Shen said quietly, and meant it. "Beautiful." The old woman laughed. "You are kind. I know it's not good like the paintings of the famous artists. But when I look at it, I see my son's hand moving the brush. I see the afternoon he painted it, how carefully he mixed the colors, how he stood back and looked with his head tilted just so." She touched the frame gently. "The famous artist Shen came through here once, years ago. My son showed him this painting, hoping for guidance. Shen barely glanced at it. He said it showed no promise. My son stopped painting after that." The words hit Shen like stones. He remembered that day. Remembered the young man with hopeful eyes showing him an awkward painting. Remembered dismissing it without really seeing it, without recognizing the love that had created it. He had crushed someone's joy with his casual assessment, his expert opinion delivered with thoughtless authority. "I am Shen," he said, his voice breaking. The old woman stared at him. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Shen bowed low, lower than his status required, lower than seemed appropriate. "Forgive me," he said. "I was a fool. I thought skill was everything. I didn't see that your son's painting held something my work has always lacked. Heart, presence, love." The old woman's eyes filled with tears. "He wanted so much to paint like you," she said. "He never picked up a brush again after you spoke to him." Shen stayed in that village for 3 days. He sat with the old woman and listened to stories of her son. He looked at the painting for hours, really looked, studying what he had missed before. He saw how the young man had observed that tree with such attention, how he had tried to capture not just what it looked like, but what it felt like to stand before it on that particular autumn afternoon. When Shen left, he gave the old woman all the money he carried, but he knew no amount could restore what his pride had taken. He returned to his studio and looked at his paintings with new eyes. Technically brilliant, praised by experts, utterly empty of the one thing that mattered. He had painted to demonstrate his skill. The young man had painted to express his wonder. Who was the real artist? For months, Shen could not paint. Then slowly, he began again. But differently. He stopped painting to impress. He stopped thinking about collectors and critics. He painted to see what he was looking at, to be present with it, to honor it. His new work was different. Some critics said it was less refined. But those who had eyes to see recognized that Shen had finally learned to paint. This story teaches us that expertise without humility becomes destructive. Shen's knowledge was genuine. His assessment of the technical flaws in the young man's painting was accurate. But accuracy without compassion is cruelty. Expertise without humility is violence. He wielded his authority like a weapon, casually wounding someone whose only crime was vulnerability. How often do we do this? We have knowledge or skill in some area, and we use it to diminish others. We critique without kindness. We point out flaws without recognizing effort. We assess with cold expertise what someone created with love and hope. Our accuracy becomes our excuse for cruelty. Think about times you've used your knowledge to make someone feel small. When you corrected someone's grammar in a way that embarrassed them. When you pointed out mistakes in a beginner's work without acknowledging their courage in trying. When you dismissed someone's attempt because it didn't meet professional standards, without seeing the heart they put into it. The young man's painting lacked technical skill, but it held something Shen's celebrated works did not. Genuine presence, authentic connection, love. These qualities cannot be taught in art schools or found in technique manuals. They flow from humility, from approaching your subject with reverence rather than mastery. Shen learned too late that the question is not, am I skilled? But, am I present? Am I honoring what's before me? Am I creating from love or from ego? His fame had made him blind to these questions. Success had convinced him that his way of seeing was the only correct way. He had forgotten that there are many ways to approach a subject, many kinds of value beyond technical proficiency. What would change if you approached others' efforts not as an expert evaluating but as a fellow traveler appreciating? If instead of immediately noting what's wrong, you first acknowledged what took courage? If you recognized that someone's clumsy attempt might hold more truth than your polished perfection? The old woman's son stopped painting because an expert told him he had no promise. How many artists, writers, musicians, creators have we lost because someone with authority dismissed them? How much beauty has never entered the world because casual cruelty disguised as expertise crushed the fragile new growth of someone's creative courage? Rest now in this darkness where no one is judging your efforts, where you don't have to be perfect or skilled or impressive, where your clumsy attempts to live well are enough, where your simple presence is valued more than any expertise you could ever accumulate. Breathe. Sleep. Let go of needing to be the expert. Just be the person trying, loving, showing up. That's enough. In a monastery, there was a senior monk named Tenzin who had practiced for 40 years. He sat in meditation daily. He knew the teachings thoroughly. He led services with practiced skill. But something in him had calcified. He no longer felt wonder. Practice had become routine. Enlightenment had become a concept rather than a living possibility. New students would arrive with their questions and enthusiasm, and Tenzin would answer with patient boredom. He had heard it all before. He knew where each path led. Nothing surprised him anymore. One day, a young novice arrived who asked the strangest questions. Why does the temple bell sound different when I'm angry versus when I'm peaceful? What happens to my breath when I sleep? Do the mice in the meditation hall achieve enlightenment from listening to our chanting? Tenzin initially dismissed these as foolish questions, but the young novice persisted. Each day brought new observations, new wonderings, new ways of seeing what Tenzin had stopped noticing decades ago. One morning, the novice approached Tenzin with excitement. "I discovered something," he said. "When I sweep the courtyard with resentment, thinking I should be meditating instead, the sweeping takes forever and the courtyard never feels clean. But when I sweep just to sweep, loving the sound of the broom and watching the dust dance in the sunlight, the work finishes quickly and the stones shine. Isn't that amazing?" Tenzin started to explain that this was basic mindfulness, nothing special. But something stopped him. When was the last time he had found anything amazing? When had he last swept with complete presence rather than thinking about the next task? When had ordinary work filled him with wonder? The novice's beginner's mind held something Tenzin had lost. Fresh eyes, immediate presence, the ability to be genuinely surprised by the obvious. "Teach me," Tenzin said, and the words felt strange in his mouth. "Show me how you sweep." The young novice looked confused. "But you're the teacher," he said. "You've been practicing for 40 years. "Exactly," Tenzin replied. "And somewhere in those 40 years, I forgot how to see what's actually in front of me. I learned so much that I stopped learning. I became an expert at practice and forgot how to actually practice. If you're willing, I'd like to learn from you." For weeks, Tenzin followed the young novice through daily tasks. He watched how the novice cleaned the meditation hall as if it were a sacred dance, how he ate each grain of rice with attention, how he greeted the garden vegetables before harvesting them, thanking them for their sacrifice. These were things Tenzin knew conceptually, but the novice lived them with fresh sincerity. "Don't you ever feel that you already know these teachings?" Tenzin asked one day. "That you've heard them enough times?" The novice looked genuinely confused. "But each day is new," he said. "I may have swept yesterday, but I've never swept this moment before. I may have eaten rice 1,000 times, but this rice, right now, I'm meeting for the first time. How could I already know something I haven't yet experienced?" Something cracked open in Tenzin's chest. He had been treating each day as a repetition of previous days, each task as something he had already completed, each teaching as something he had already mastered. He had stopped being present because he thought he had already been present enough. He had stopped learning because he believed he had already learned. The abbot noticed the change in Tenzin. "What happened to you?" he asked. "You seem different, more alive." Tenzin bowed deeply. "I learned humility," he said. "Not the kind where you acknowledge you don't know everything, but the deeper kind where you admit that even what you know, you don't really know. Where you recognize that a lifetime of practice is just the beginning. Where you become willing to learn from anyone, even someone who arrived yesterday. This teaching shows us that expertise can become its own prison. The more we know, the more we risk believing we've seen everything, heard everything, understood everything. We develop what Zen calls expert's mind, where we already know the answer before the question finishes. We stop being genuinely present because we think we've already been present to this before. The beginner's mind that the novice possessed is not ignorance. It's the wisdom of approaching each moment as genuinely new. It's the humility to recognize that life is so vast, so mysterious, so infinitely complex, that 40 years of practice hasn't exhausted its capacity to surprise us if we remain open. Think about areas of your life where you've become an expert. Your job that you've done for years. Your relationship that you've been in for decades. Your daily routine that you've followed so long you could do it in your sleep. Do you approach these areas with fresh eyes? Or do you assume you already know everything there is to know? When your partner speaks, do you listen as if hearing them for the first time? Or do you think you already know what they're going to say? When you perform a familiar task, do you give it your full attention? Or do you do it on autopilot while your mind wanders elsewhere? When someone offers you feedback, do you receive it with genuine curiosity? Or do you immediately explain why they don't understand the full situation? Tenzin's willingness to learn from someone with a fraction of his experience required profound humility. It meant admitting that longevity doesn't equal mastery. That sometimes beginners see things veterans have stopped noticing. That being teachable is more valuable than being knowledgeable. His 40 years of practice only became truly valuable when he learned to hold them lightly, to not let his experience become a barrier to new learning. The novice's question stays with us. How could we already know something we haven't yet experienced? Each moment is genuinely unique. This breath has never happened before. This sunset has never colored the sky exactly this way. This person speaking to us right now has never been exactly this age, exactly this version of themselves. If we approach each moment as truly new, life becomes endlessly fresh. But it requires the humility to not know, even when we think we do. Let your breath become slow and natural. Let your mind release its grip on what it knows. You don't need your expertise tonight. You don't need your accumulated wisdom. You can approach this moment of rest as if you've never rested before. As if sleep is a mystery you're exploring for the first time. Fresh, new, completely present. Just this breath. Just this moment. Just this now. In a village lived two farmers, one named Chen and one named Li. Chen owned the largest farm in the region. His fields stretched across the valley. His harvests were abundant. His wealth grew each year. Li worked a small plot at the edge of town. His land was rocky. His yields were modest. He lived simply, never quite getting ahead. When the villagers spoke of success, they pointed to Chen. When they spoke of poverty, they pitied Li. Chen believed this narrative. He saw his success as evidence of his worth. Li's poverty as evidence of Li's inferiority. One year, a terrible drought struck. Crops withered across the region. Chen's vast fields turned to dust. His wealth evaporated like morning dew. His proud estate fell into disrepair. For the first time in his life, Chen knew hunger. He became bitter. How could this happen to him? He had worked hard. He had earned his success. This suffering was not fair. One day, desperate and ashamed, Chen walked to Li's small farm, seeking to borrow grain to feed his family. What he found there shocked him. Despite the drought, Li's small garden thrived. He had terraced the rocky land to catch every drop of morning dew. He had built a small irrigation system using collected rainwater. He grew drought-resistant vegetables and shared them freely with neighbors. His family was thin but healthy. And Li moved through his work with quiet contentment Chen had never possessed, even in his wealthiest days. "How?" Chen asked, gesturing at the surviving garden. "How did you prepare for this when I did not?" Li looked up from the bed he was weeding, his face kind. "I have always known scarcity," he said. "I learned long ago to work with what little I have rather than resent what I lack. My poverty taught me skills your wealth never required you to learn. You had so much that you never needed to be creative. I had so little that I had to pay attention to everything." Chen felt something shift inside him. "I thought my success made me better than you," he admitted. "I thought your poverty meant you were less intelligent, less capable, less worthy." Li smiled gently. "And now you know that wealth and worth are not the same thing. That success can teach you pride, while hardship can teach you wisdom. That sometimes the student is found in unexpected places." Chen bowed low, lower than his former status would have allowed. "Will you teach me?" he asked. "Teach me how to work with little. Teach me the skills poverty taught you. I see now that my abundance gave me everything except what I most needed to learn." Li helped Chen stand. "Come," he said. "Let me show you how to collect dew. How to choose plants that survive on almost nothing. How to make a small harvest feed many mouths. These are not prestigious skills. No one celebrates them. But they are what keep us alive when everything else fails." For months, Chen worked alongside Li. He learned to see value in tiny things he had previously ignored. A morning's dew, a handful of seeds, a neighbor's shared knowledge. He learned that humility isn't just acknowledging you don't know everything. It's being willing to learn from those you once considered beneath you. When the drought finally broke and rains returned, Chen rebuilt his farm differently. Smaller, more resilient, more focused on sustainability than size. He never forgot that his lowest moment had been when he learned his most important lessons. And he never forgot that his teacher had been the man he had pitied. This story reveals that hardship can be a greater teacher than success. Chen's wealth had insulated him from learning essential skills. His abundance had allowed him to be wasteful because he could afford to be. His success had convinced him he had nothing to learn from someone poorer. The drought stripped away these illusions and forced him to face his actual ignorance. We often equate success with intelligence and poverty with failure. We assume wealthy people are smarter, more capable, more worthy. We look down on those who struggle. But Chen discovered that Li possessed knowledge and skills far more valuable than what Chen's wealth had brought him. Li knew how to thrive with little, how to be creative with scarcity, how to find contentment regardless of circumstances. Think about who you consider your teachers. Are they only people with prestigious positions, impressive credentials, obvious success? Or are you humble enough to learn from those struggling, from those society overlooks, from those with less material success but perhaps more practical wisdom? The person working 2 jobs to support their family might teach you about resilience that your comfortable life has never required you to develop. The elderly person on a fixed income might show you creativity with limited resources that your abundance has never forced you to learn. The immigrant building a new life might demonstrate courage your privileged position has never asked of you. Chen's willingness to bow to Li, to acknowledge Li as teacher, required him to release his entire self-concept. He had to admit that his success had been partially luck, that his wealth didn't make him superior, that poverty doesn't equal stupidity, that he desperately needed to learn from someone he had previously dismissed. This is profound humility. Not just saying I don't know everything, but actually seeking wisdom from those your pride had taught you to ignore. What would change if you approached every person as a potential teacher? If you looked for what each person knows that you don't? If you were humble enough to learn from the janitor, the cashier, the person experiencing homelessness, anyone who has walked paths you haven't walked and therefore knows things you don't know? Li's generosity in teaching Chen, rather than shaming him, is equally important. He didn't say I told you so. He didn't gloat over Chen's downfall. He simply shared what he knew with the same humility he approached everything. This is what real wisdom looks like when it's paired with compassion. Breathe slowly now. Feel yourself sinking deeper into rest. You don't need to be successful tonight. You don't need to have all the answers. You can be the student, learning, growing, open to wisdom from unexpected sources. You can let go of pride and embrace the humility of not knowing. Rest in that freedom now. There was an elderly monk who lived in a cave high on a mountain. He had practiced meditation for 50 years. Students would climb the steep path to seek his guidance, expecting profound teachings. But when they arrived, they found something unexpected. The monk served them tea with his own hands. He washed their feet if they had walked far. He listened to their problems with complete attention, never interrupting, never rushing to give answers. One young student, after several visits, finally asked, "Master, when will you give me the secret teaching? When will you tell me the profound truth I've climbed this mountain to learn?" The old monk smiled. "What teaching do you think you haven't received? You've only served me tea and listened to my troubles," the student said. "Where is the wisdom? Where is the enlightenment you're famous for?" The monk was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "For 50 years, I have served tea. For 50 years, I have listened. Is this not teaching? Is this not wisdom?" The student looked confused. "But anyone can serve tea. Anyone can listen. I came seeking something special, something only a master could give me." "Exactly," the monk said. "You came seeking something extraordinary, something that would make you feel special, something you could add to your collection of spiritual achievements. But I have only this to give: my full presence, my complete attention, my humble service. If you cannot see the teaching in this, then no teaching I could give would help you." The student felt frustration rising. "Are you saying that after 50 years of practice, serving tea is your only accomplishment?" "No," the monk replied gently. "After 50 years of practice, serving tea is what remains when everything else has fallen away. All my ideas about enlightenment, all my pride in my spiritual attainments, all my need to be seen as wise, all of it has dissolved. And what remains is this: the ability to be fully present with another person, to serve without needing recognition, to listen without forming judgments, to meet each moment with simplicity." He poured more tea, his movements slow and careful. Most people think the spiritual path is about adding things: more knowledge, more experiences, more realizations. But the path I've walked is about subtraction. Less ego, less pride, less need for specialness. Until finally, all that's left is this: simple presence, humble service, nothing extraordinary, nothing to brag about. Just this moment, completely lived. The student sat in silence, watching the steam rise from his teacup. Is this what humility means? Not achieving great things, but being willing to do small things without needing them to be great. Perhaps, the monk said. Or perhaps humility means releasing the need for life to be anything other than what it is. This tea, this mountain, this conversation, this moment exactly as it presents itself. Not waiting for something more profound, not seeking anything else. Just this. Years later, that student would tell others about his visits to the mountain cave, about the profound teaching he received that he had almost missed because he was looking for something more impressive, about learning that wisdom sometimes looks like an old man making tea, that enlightenment might be found in complete presence rather than extraordinary achievements. That humility means being so empty of self-importance that you can be filled with the moment itself. This teaching reminds us that we often overlook the profound in our search for the impressive. We want spiritual awakening to look dramatic. We want wisdom to sound eloquent. We want enlightenment to feel extraordinary. But the monk had practiced for 50 years only to arrive at simplicity, complete presence, humble service. These don't look impressive, but they are the fruits of profound transformation. Consider what you're seeking in your own life. Are you chasing experiences that will make you feel special? Achievements that will set you apart? Knowledge that will elevate you? Or are you willing to find the sacred in the ordinary, the profound in the simple, the divine in the mundane? When you make tea for someone, are you fully present? Or is your mind already on to the next task? When you listen to someone speak, are you completely there? Or are you planning what you'll say next? When you perform small services for others, do you do them with your whole heart? Or do you rush through them, thinking you should be doing something more important? The monk's humility wasn't passive or weak. It was the strength to be completely ordinary, to let go of needing to be recognized as wise, to serve without needing credit, to practice without needing to demonstrate results. This requires more courage than pursuing impressive achievements. It's harder to be content with simplicity than to chase significance. Think about the small acts of kindness you perform daily. Holding a door, saying thank you, listening to someone's troubles, making someone a meal. These seem trivial compared to grand gestures, but the monk suggests these ordinary moments, when done with complete presence and humble heart, might be where true wisdom lives. What if, instead of seeking enlightenment, you simply sought to be fully present with your tea? Instead of pursuing spiritual attainment, you practiced listening completely when someone speaks. Instead of accumulating wisdom, you embodied simplicity. Would this be less valuable? Or might it be exactly what the world needs most? The student wanted something special, something he could point to and say, "This is what I learned from the famous master." But the real learning was subtler. Learning to see the extraordinary in the ordinary. Learning that presence is the gift. Learning that after all the seeking and striving, we arrive back at simple moments, fully lived. Let your breathing be easy and natural. Let your thoughts slow like settling dust. You don't need to be anywhere but here. You don't need to achieve anything tonight. This moment of rest, this simple act of breathing, this ordinary darkness holding you gently, this is enough. This is everything. Just this. Just here. Just now. Sleep comes. We have journeyed together through 20 stories tonight, each one exploring humility and modesty from different angles. We've met scholars who needed to empty their cups, monks who found wisdom in washing dishes, potters who chose usefulness over fame, teachers who learned that actions speak louder than lectures, artists who discovered that love matters more than technique. Through each story, the same truth emerges. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. It's the freedom to learn from everyone, the wisdom to serve without needing recognition, the strength to be ordinary in a world that worships extraordinary, the courage to be small enough to see others clearly. These teachings are not meant to be memorized. They're meant to be absorbed. Let them work on you as you sleep, settling into places words cannot reach. Tomorrow when you wake, you may notice small shifts. Perhaps you listen more carefully. Perhaps you defend yourself less quickly. Perhaps you find yourself willing to learn from someone you might have dismissed before. This is the quiet transformation that humility brings. If these stories brought you some peace, consider subscribing to this channel. Others are seeking exactly what you found here tonight. Your support helps these teachings reach them. Rest deeply now, knowing that you are enough exactly as you are. Your worth is not measured by achievements or status. You are valuable simply because you exist. You are worthy of love simply because you breathe. There is nothing you need to prove, nothing you need to become, nothing you need to accomplish to deserve rest. May you sleep without disturbance. May you wake with gentleness. May you carry these teachings lightly, wearing them like comfortable old clothes rather than impressive new robes. Good night, dear friend. Rest well in the simplicity of this moment. In a monastery deep in the mountains of Tibet, there lived a young monk named Dorje who was gifted with an extraordinary memory. He could recite entire sutras after hearing them once. He could remember every teaching, every commentary, every word his masters spoke. The other monks marveled at his ability. The teachers praised his intelligence. And slowly, quietly, pride began to grow in Dorje's heart, like frost forming on a window. He began to notice how much slower the other students were, how they struggled to remember teachings he grasped instantly, how they asked questions about concepts that seemed obvious to him. He never said anything unkind. He never openly boasted, but in his heart, he had begun to separate himself from them. He was different, special, more capable. One winter, a wandering yogi arrived at the monastery, seeking shelter from a snowstorm. He was ancient, his face weathered like stone, his body bent with age. His robes were tattered and patched many times over. He carried nothing but a walking stick and a small bowl. The abbot welcomed him and assigned Dorje to attend to the visitor's needs. Dorje brought the old yogi to the guest quarters, showed him where to sleep, brought him food and tea. The yogi ate slowly, his hands shaking slightly as he lifted the bowl. Dorje watched with barely concealed impatience. Everything the old man did took so long. His movements were labored. His speech was slow. Surely this yogi had nothing to teach someone as quick and intelligent as Dorje. That evening, the abbot invited the yogi to share teachings with the community. Dorje attended, expecting little. The old yogi sat before them in silence for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost a whisper, so everyone had to lean forward to hear. "I cannot remember sutras," he said. "My mind is old and forgets more than it holds. I cannot recall the names of all the Buddhas. I cannot recite the stages of the path. In fact, there is very little I can remember with certainty." He paused, looking around the room with eyes that seemed to hold entire lifetimes. "But I can tell you this. I remember the face of every person who was kind to me. I remember the feeling of sunlight on my face after days of rain. I remember the taste of water after a long thirst. I remember the sound of my mother's voice, though she has been gone for 60 years. Another long pause. Dorje shifted impatiently. Where was the teaching? Where was the wisdom? I spent 40 years, the yogi continued, trying to fill my mind with knowledge. I memorized texts. I studied philosophy. I collected teachings like precious stones. And the more I knew, the less I understood. The more I remembered, the less I experienced. My mind became so full that there was no room for life to enter." He looked directly at Dorje then, and Dorje felt suddenly exposed, as if the old man could see directly into his heart. "One day, I was walking through a forest, reciting sutras in my mind, very pleased with how much I had memorized. I walked past a tree covered in blossoms. I walked past a stream singing over stones. I walked past a bird building her nest. And I saw none of it. I was so busy thinking about what I knew that I missed everything that was actually present." The old yogi's voice grew even softer. "That day, I understood. Knowledge without presence is just noise in the head. Intelligence without humility is just pride wearing scholar's robes. The ability to remember everything means nothing if you cannot be here now." He smiled then, and his whole face transformed with a joy that made him suddenly beautiful despite his age. "So I began to forget. Not trying to forget, but not trying to remember either. I let the sutras go. I let the commentaries drift away. I let my precious knowledge dissolve like snow in spring rain. And as my mind emptied, life rushed in to fill the space." Dorje felt tears on his face without knowing when he had started crying. The old yogi had spoken directly to the thing Dorje had been most proud of, his exceptional memory, and revealed it as a potential obstacle rather than an asset. After the teaching, Dorje approached the yogi with a bow. "How do I learn what you know?" he asked, his voice humble for perhaps the first time in years. The old yogi laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "But I just told you. I don't know anything. That's the whole teaching." He reached out with a gnarled hand and touched Dorje's forehead gently. "Your mind is so full, young one. So crowded with words and concepts and remembered teachings. When will you empty it enough to actually see what's in front of you?" "But surely knowledge is valuable," Dorje said. "Surely remembering the teachings matters." "Does it?" the yogi asked. "Or does living the teachings matter? You can recite the words of the Buddha perfectly. But can you be present with suffering the way the Buddha was present? You can remember every teaching on compassion. But can you feel compassion for the monk who frustrates you? You know everything about impermanence. But have you actually accepted that you will die? That everyone you love will die? That nothing lasts? Dorje opened his mouth to answer and found he had no words. He knew the teachings intellectually. He could explain them brilliantly. But had he actually integrated them into his being? Had they changed how he lived? Or were they just information stored in his impressive memory? The old yogi patted his hand. "Knowledge is a raft to cross the river," he said. "But some people spend their whole lives admiring the raft, decorating it, showing others how well built their raft is, and they never actually use it to cross to the other shore. Don't be in love with the raft, young one. Use it to cross the river. And when you reach the other side, you must leave even the raft behind." That night, Dorje sat in meditation with a different intention. Instead of trying to remember teachings or perfect his practice, he simply sat. He let his busy mind exhaust itself. He didn't try to control his thoughts or demonstrate to himself how well he could concentrate. He just sat, breathing, being, allowing whatever arose to arise and pass. And in that simple sitting, something shifted. He heard the wind outside the meditation hall. Really heard it, not as background noise while he thought about other things, but as an actual presence, a voice of the mountain itself. He felt his breath moving in and out, not thinking about breath, but actually experiencing it. The cool air entering, the warm air leaving, the subtle pause between. He was present, simply present, without needing to be anything else. In the following months, Dorje began to practice forgetting. When he caught himself comparing his abilities to others, he noticed it and let it go. When he felt proud of remembering something others had forgotten, he observed the pride without feeding it. When someone asked him a question and he knew the answer, he paused before responding, making sure he was offering the answer they needed rather than demonstrating what he knew. The other monks noticed something had changed in Dorje. He seemed more present, more patient, more genuinely interested in others rather than subtly competing with them. When someone shared an insight, even a simple one, Dorje listened as if hearing something precious. Because he had learned that every person carries wisdom, and the truly intelligent person is humble enough to receive it. Years later, when Dorje had become a teacher himself, students would ask him about his famous memory, about all the teachings he surely knew. He would smile and say, "I've forgotten most of what I memorized, but I remember how to be present. I remember how to listen. I remember that everyone I meet knows something I don't. If I had to choose between a perfect memory and a humble heart, I would choose humility every time. Because humility keeps me teachable, and being teachable keeps me alive." This story shows us the danger of intellectual pride, perhaps the subtlest and most insidious form of pride. We value intelligence highly in our culture. We praise the brilliant mind. We celebrate those who know the most, remember the best, understand the quickest. And there's nothing wrong with intelligence itself. The danger comes when we begin to believe that our knowledge makes us superior to others. Dorje's gift was genuine. His memory was exceptional, but he had begun to use it as a measuring stick, constantly comparing himself to others and finding them lacking. His intelligence had become a wall separating him from authentic connection. He could no longer learn from those he considered less intelligent because he had decided in advance that they had nothing to teach him. Think about your own relationship with knowledge and intelligence. Do you use what you know as evidence of your worth? When you're the smartest person in the room, do you feel satisfied in a way that depends on others being less smart? When someone doesn't understand something you grasp easily, do you feel a subtle sense of superiority? These are signs that intelligence has become entangled with ego. The old yogi's teaching cuts through this pride with radical simplicity. What good is remembering everything if you experience nothing? What value is knowledge that isn't lived? You can know all about love without ever loving fully. You can understand all the teachings on compassion without ever feeling genuine compassion. You can memorize wisdom without ever being wise. Consider the difference between knowing about something and knowing something directly. You might know intellectually that life is impermanent. You've read it, understood it, could explain it to others. But have you actually absorbed this truth so deeply that it changes how you live? That you appreciate each moment because you truly understand it won't come again? That you love people fully because you really know they won't always be here? The old yogi had learned to value presence over knowledge, experience over information, being over knowing. This doesn't mean knowledge is worthless. It means knowledge is a tool, not a trophy. It's meant to be used in service of living well, not collected to prove how smart we are. What would change if you approached each moment the way the yogi suggested? If instead of walking through life while reciting thoughts in your head, you actually looked at the blossoming trees, actually listened to the streams, actually saw the people around you rather than thinking about them. This is the shift from living in our heads to living in our actual lives. Dorji's practice of forgetting is profound. Not forcing himself to forget, but not clinging to what he knew. Letting the collected information be less important than immediate presence. Creating space in his mind for life to enter. This is true intelligence. The wisdom to know that an empty cup can be filled, but a full cup cannot. Breathe slowly now. Let your clever mind rest. Let all your accumulated knowledge settle like dust. You don't need to know anything right now. You don't need to remember or understand or figure out. Just breathe. Just be. Let presence be enough. This simple being, this ordinary breathing, this quiet, resting in darkness, this is wisdom too. Perhaps the deepest kind. In ancient China, there was a government official named Zhang who had risen to a position of great power. He oversaw an entire province. He advised the emperor himself. People bowed when he passed. His word carried the weight of law. And he had convinced himself that this power was his due, earned through his own merit and intelligence. One day, traveling through a remote part of his province, Zhang's carriage broke down far from any town. His servants worked to repair it, but the damage was extensive. Night was falling. Zhang, accustomed to luxury, found himself forced to seek shelter in a poor farmer's cottage. The farmer and his wife were elderly, their home simple, their possessions few. They had no idea who Zhang was. His fine clothes were covered in dust from the road. His usual retinue was absent. He was just a stranger seeking help. The couple welcomed him without question. They gave him their only bed while they slept on the floor. They shared their simple meal, though it left them with little for tomorrow. They tended to his comfort, though they were weary from a day of hard labor in the fields. Zhang had intended to reveal his identity, to command rather than request. But something stopped him. Perhaps curiosity, perhaps shame. He accepted their hospitality as if he were truly just a traveler in need. In the morning, the farmer's wife prepared rice porridge and served it with humble apologies that she had nothing better to offer. Zhang ate and found it the most satisfying meal he'd had in years. As he prepared to leave, his carriage now repaired, the farmer refused any payment. "You are a traveler far from home," the old man said. "We help because this is what humans do for one another." To take payment would transform kindness into business. Zhang bowed to them, moved in ways he didn't fully understand. As his carriage pulled away, he looked back to see the elderly couple returning to their fields, their backs bent under the morning sun, their whole day ahead of them filled with hard labor that would never bring them wealth or recognition. Back in his grand residence, Zhang could not stop thinking about the farmer and his wife. They had nothing. No power, no status, no influence. Yet they had shared everything they had without hesitation. They had treated a stranger with more genuine respect than many of Zhang's subordinates showed him despite his title. They had given without expectation of return. Zhang began to see his own life differently. He had power, yes, but had he used it to serve as selflessly as this poor farmer served? He had wealth, but did he share it as freely as this farmer shared his meager rice? He had status, but did he treat those below him with the dignity this farmer showed to a stranger? He realized with painful clarity that he had been confusing position with worth. He had believed that being appointed to high office made him a better person than those he governed. That having power over others meant he was superior to them. That wealth was evidence of virtue rather than often being just the result of circumstance and luck. Zhang made a decision. He would return to the farmer's cottage, reveal his identity, and offer to reward the couple for their kindness. He traveled back to the remote village with gifts, prepared to bestow his official favor upon them. But when he arrived at the small cottage, he found it empty. Asking in the village, he learned that the farmer had died suddenly 3 days after Zhang's visit. His wife had gone to live with her daughter in a distant town. Zhang stood before the empty cottage and wept. He had wanted to reward their kindness, but more than that, he realized he had wanted them to know who he was. He had wanted to see their faces when they discovered they had housed and fed a high official. He had wanted, even in his gratitude, to re-establish the hierarchy that placed him above them. His planned reward had been about his ego as much as their kindness. Now he would never have that satisfaction. The farmer had died never knowing that the dusty traveler he helped was someone powerful. And somehow this was exactly right. The farmer hadn't helped Zhang because of who Zhang was. He had helped because a human being needed help. His kindness had been pure, untainted by any hope of reward or recognition. Zhang returned to his duties changed. He began to visit the province, not in his official carriage, but dressed simply, traveling on foot where he could. He listened to people's problems, not from his elevated position, but sitting with them as an equal. He made decisions not based on what would increase his prestige, but on what would actually help those he served. His subordinates noticed the change and whispered among themselves. Some thought he had grown strange. Others recognized something that looked like wisdom. Zhang didn't care about their opinions anymore. He had learned from a poor farmer what no amount of education or position had taught him. That true nobility has nothing to do with titles. That real power is found in service without recognition. That the highest position a person can occupy is not above others, but among them. When other officials asked Zhang about his changed manner, he would tell them the story of the farmer. "I met someone," he would say, "who reminded me that position is temporary, but character is eternal. That power is a responsibility, not a privilege. That the truly great are often those the world considers small." This story teaches us about the humility that comes from recognizing that our position in society's hierarchy doesn't reflect our actual worth as human beings. Zhang had fallen into the trap that catches many who achieve worldly success. He had begun to believe that his title, his power, his status made him fundamentally better than those without these things. The farmer's unconscious teaching was powerful precisely because it was unconscious. He didn't set out to humble Zhang. He simply treated a stranger with kindness because this is what he believed all humans deserve. His dignity didn't depend on recognition. His generosity didn't require an audience. His nobility was intrinsic, woven into who he was rather than conferred by any external authority. How often do we confuse our roles with our identities? The job title, the degree, the position, the status symbols become who we think we are. We forget that these are temporary assignments, costumes we wear for a while. Beneath the costume, we are simply human beings, no more and no less valuable than any other human being. Think about how you treat people based on their perceived status. Are you more polite to your boss than to the janitor? More patient with the client than with the customer service representative? More respectful to the doctor than to the nurse? These small differences in how we treat people based on their position reveal our unconscious belief that some people are more valuable than others. The farmer treated Zhang with dignity not because of who Zhang was, but because the farmer believed all people deserve dignity. This is true equality, true humility. Not pretending we're all the same in circumstances or abilities or positions, but recognizing we're all equally human, equally deserving of respect, equally worthy of kindness. Zhang's realization that he would never get to reveal his identity to the farmer contained profound teaching. He had to sit with the fact that his kindness to the farmer would be the same kindness the farmer had shown him, given without expectation of recognition or reward. He couldn't use his power to elevate the situation. He had to simply be grateful, simply be changed, without getting credit for being changed. What would shift in your life if you truly believed that your worth had nothing to do with your achievements or status? If you understood that the CEO and the custodian are equally valuable as human beings, if you treated everyone, regardless of their position or power, with the same respect you'd show to someone you consider important. This is the liberation that humility offers. Freedom from the exhausting hierarchy of better than and less than. Let your body sink deeper into rest. Here in this darkness, all titles fall away. Your job, your status, your achievements, your position, none of it matters right now. You are simply a human being, breathing, resting, being held by the earth beneath you. This is your true identity. Not the roles you play, but the consciousness experiencing this moment. Just this. Just you. Just now. Rest in that simple truth. There was a master calligrapher named Kenji whose brushwork was celebrated throughout Japan. His characters flowed with such grace that people said they could hear music in his strokes. Students came from distant provinces to study with him, hoping to learn the secret of his art. Kenji accepted students willingly, but warned them that the path to mastery was long and humble. One young man arrived full of talent and ambition. His name was Hiroshi, and he had already achieved some recognition in his hometown. He expected that with Kenji's teaching, he would quickly become a master himself. Kenji looked at some of Hiroshi's work and nodded. "You have natural ability," he said, "but ability is just the beginning. Now comes the real work." He handed Hiroshi a brush and pointed to a bucket of water and a large flat stone in the courtyard. "Each morning, you will practice your characters here. Use water as your ink, the stone as your paper." Hiroshi felt confused. "But Master, water dries instantly. I won't be able to see what I've written to learn from it." "Exactly," Kenji said. "For the next year, all your practice will disappear as soon as you create it. No one will see it. There will be nothing to save, nothing to show, nothing to prove your improvement. Just the practice itself." Hiroshi wanted to protest. How could he improve if he couldn't study his work? How could he demonstrate his progress if nothing remained? But he had come to learn from a master, so he bowed and accepted the instruction. Each morning before dawn, Hiroshi went to the courtyard with his bucket of water. He dipped his brush and drew characters on the stone. Beautiful flowing characters that gleamed wet for a moment, then vanished in the morning sun. Hour after hour, creating beauty that disappeared instantly. No one watched. No one praised. The stone held no record of his effort. At first, Hiroshi found it almost unbearable. His ego demanded evidence, wanted proof, needed to see improvement accumulating. But day after day, week after week, he continued, and slowly something began to shift. Without the work remaining to judge, he stopped being so critical. Without anyone watching, he stopped performing for an audience. Without needing to demonstrate progress, he stopped comparing today's work to yesterday's. He began to simply make the characters, not trying to make them beautiful, not hoping they would be perfect, just allowing his hand to move, his brush to flow, his breathing to guide the strokes. Some characters felt alive under his brush. Others felt stiff. But all disappeared equally, good and bad together, into nothingness. After 6 months, something even stranger happened. Hiroshi found he was enjoying the practice. The joy was in the movement itself, not in what it produced. The satisfaction was in complete presence with each stroke, not in creating something to show others. He would finish his morning practice and feel deeply fulfilled, though nothing remained of his work. One morning, Kenji came to watch. Hiroshi was so absorbed in the practice that he didn't notice his teacher's presence. His brush moved like it was dancing. Each character flowed into being and disappeared, flowed into being and disappeared. There was no hesitation, no self-consciousness, no trying, just complete presence with the brush, the water, the stone, the movement. After Hiroshi finished, Kenji spoke, startling him. "Now you are ready to use ink," he said. Hiroshi bowed deeply. "Master, I don't understand. What did I learn from making characters that vanish?" Kenji smiled. "You learn to create without attachment to the creation. You learn to practice without needing to prove anything. You learn to find joy in the doing rather than in the done. Most importantly, you learn that your worth as an artist is not in what you produce but in your relationship with the art itself." He gestured to a stack of rice paper and a pot of ink. "Now when you create something permanent, you will not be enslaved by it. You will not need it to be perfect because your identity is not attached to it. You will not be devastated if it is criticized because your worth is not determined by others' opinions. You have learned humility through impermanence. Hiroshi practiced with ink for the next 6 months. His work was extraordinary, alive with the freedom he had discovered on the stone. But what amazed his fellow students was his response to both praise and criticism. When someone admired his work, he accepted the compliment gracefully, but didn't grasp at it. When someone criticized a piece, he considered the feedback without becoming defensive. He could look at his own work and see its flaws without being crushed, see its beauty without being inflated. Years later, when Hiroshi had become a master himself, he used the same practice with his students. The stone in the courtyard, the bucket of water, the vanishing characters. Many students rebelled against it. They wanted to create things that lasted. They wanted proof of their progress. They wanted recognition for their effort. But those who persisted through the year of water and stone emerged transformed. They had learned the deep humility of creating for the sake of creation itself. Hiroshi would tell them, "Everything we make will eventually vanish. The characters I brush with ink will fade with time. The buildings people construct will crumble. The books written will turn to dust. We are all writing with water on stone. The only difference is how long it takes to dry." When you understand this, you are free to create beautifully without grasping, without needing your work to grant you immortality. This teaching reveals the humility that comes from releasing attachment to our creations. Hiroshi's ego wanted his work to be permanent, to be seen, to be praised. Writing with water on stone stripped away all possibility of this gratification. He had to find another reason to practice. And in finding that reason, creating for the pure joy of creating, he discovered freedom. We live in a culture obsessed with permanence and recognition. We don't just want to do good work. We want credit for it. We want it documented, recognized, remembered. We take photos of our achievements. We build portfolios. We collect reviews and testimonials. We need proof that our efforts matter. But this need for external validation keeps us imprisoned. Think about work you've done that no one knows about. Acts of kindness performed anonymously. Problems you solved that no one noticed. Beauty you created that no one saw. How does it feel to know that work exists without recognition? Does it feel like it doesn't count? Like it was wasted? Or can you find satisfaction in the doing itself, regardless of whether anyone knows? Hiroshi's year of water and stone was training in impermanence. Everything passes. Everything fades. Nothing lasts. When we truly absorb this truth, we can create and contribute without desperately grasping for our work to make us immortal. We can do our best and then let it go. We can offer our gifts and not need them to be treasured forever. The practice also trained him in humility by removing the audience. So much of what we do is performed for others. We work hard partly because we enjoy the work, but also because we want to be seen working hard. We create beauty partly for its own sake, but also because we want to be known as someone who creates beauty. When no one is watching, when nothing remains to prove we were there, why do we bother? If the only reason is external recognition, we discover we have no internal motivation. But if we can find the joy in the practice itself, in complete presence with what we're doing, then we are free. Free from needing applause, free from requiring validation, free to create, to contribute, to live fully, whether or not anyone ever knows about it. What would change if you approached your work this way? If you did your best, whether or not anyone was watching. If you created beauty, whether or not anyone would see it. If you contributed to the world without needing credit. This is the freedom that humility offers. Breathe gently now. Let your mind release its grip on needing to prove yourself. All your efforts to demonstrate your worth, to create something permanent, to be remembered, let them dissolve like water on stone. In this moment, you are here, breathing, being. This is enough. This simple presence is more valuable than any permanent monument you could create. Rest in that truth. Rest deeply. In a village marketplace, there was a merchant named Liang who sold cloth. He had worked the same stall for 30 years. His fabrics were good quality but not exceptional. His prices were fair but not the cheapest. He made enough to support his family but never became wealthy. And for 30 years, he believed his life was ordinary, unremarkable, perhaps even a bit disappointing. Next to his stall was a spice merchant who had traveled to exotic lands. People would gather to hear stories of distant kingdoms and rare treasures. Down the row was a jeweler whose exquisite pieces adorned the nobility. Across the way was a medicine seller who had cured supposedly incurable ailments. Liang would listen to these merchants and feel his own life shrinking in comparison. What stories did he have? What remarkable things had he done? One day, a monk came to the marketplace, seeking directions to a monastery in the mountains. Liang helped him, drawing a map and suggesting the best route. The monk thanked him and was about to leave when he paused. "You have kind eyes," he said to Liang. "Tell me, what do you do?" "I sell cloth," Liang replied, embarrassed by the ordinariness of his answer. "Just cloth? Nothing special?" The monk smiled. "May I watch you work for a while?" Puzzled, Liang agreed. The market was busy that day. Liang attended to customer after customer. A woman came looking for fabric to make clothes for her growing children. Liang showed her the most durable cloth, explaining which would last longest through hard play and frequent washing. He gave her a good price, knowing she had little money. A young man came seeking fabric for his wedding robe. Liang spent an hour showing him different options, patiently explaining the significance of colors and patterns, helping him choose something that honored tradition while expressing his own style. An elderly woman came needing fabric to mend her late husband's favorite shirt. She had little money. Liang found a scrap of cloth that matched perfectly and refused payment. "Keep your coins," he said gently. "The love in that mending is payment enough." Throughout the day, Liang worked with quiet attention. He never rushed anyone. He listened carefully to what they needed. He gave honest advice even when it meant recommending less expensive options. He treated the wealthy merchant and the poor laborer with exactly the same respect. As the market closed, the monk approached Liang again. "You said you do nothing special," the monk observed. "But I have watched you all day, and I have seen something remarkable." Liang looked confused. "I just sell cloth," he said. "What is remarkable about that?" "You serve each person as if they are the most important person in the world," the monk said. "You give your full attention whether they are buying much or little. You offer wisdom about fabric and about life. You see what people truly need, not just what they say they want." The young man came seeking wedding fabric. You helped him think about how he wants to honor his ancestors and express his individuality. The elderly woman came for fabric. You gave her permission to grieve and remembered that love continues beyond death. The monk continued. The spice merchant tells exciting stories, but I watched him yesterday. He is impatient with simple customers. He judges people by how much they spend. The jeweler creates beautiful things, but he treats those who cannot afford his work with contempt. You do simple work with extraordinary presence and compassion. Do you not see how rare this is? Liang felt something shift in his chest. For 30 years, he had judged his life by comparison to others. He had believed that remarkable meant unusual, that valuable meant rare, that worthy meant exceptional. He had never considered that his steady kindness, his patient service, his genuine care for each person who approached his stall might be the truly remarkable thing. But anyone could do what I do, Liang protested weakly. The monk shook his head. Could they? Most people serve with part of their attention while their minds wander elsewhere. Most people treat customers as interruptions to their day rather than as the very purpose of it. Most people long to be somewhere else doing something else. You are completely present with simple work. This is not common. This is mastery. Liang thought about this long after the monk had left. He began to notice things he had never seen before. How the mother who bought fabric for her children always left his stall looking a bit lighter, as if his attention had eased some burden she carried. How the young people who came for advice lingered, seeming to need his patient wisdom as much as they needed cloth. How the elderly customers smiled with recognition, treasuring the fact that he remembered them, their stories, their lives. He realized that for 30 years, he had been doing sacred work without recognizing it. He had been serving people with genuine presence. He had been offering kindness without thought of reward. He had been seeing the humanity in each person rather than just seeing them as transactions. And he had dismissed all of this as ordinary because it wasn't flashy or unusual or the kind of thing people tell stories about. From that day forward, Liang approached his work differently. Not changing what he did, but changing how he saw it. Each person who came to his stall was an opportunity to practice presence, to offer kindness, to serve with full attention. The work was still simple, but he had learned that simple work, done with an open heart and humble spirit, was as valuable as any exotic adventure or rare creation. Years later, when Liang was old, people would tell their children, "Go to the cloth merchant." Yes, his fabrics are good, but more than that, he will listen to you. He will see you. He will remind you of your own worth. And Liang would hear these words with humility, understanding finally that a life doesn't need to be exceptional to be meaningful. That steady kindness is as valuable as dramatic heroism. That the humble work of genuinely serving others creates ripples that reach further than we can ever know. This story teaches us about finding meaning in ordinary work and ordinary lives. Liang had judged himself by the world's standards, measuring his worth against those who seemed more successful, more interesting, more remarkable. But the monk saw what Liang couldn't see. That presence and compassion transform even simple work into something sacred. We are constantly bombarded with messages telling us we should be extraordinary, be exceptional, stand out, make a big impact, leave a legacy. And there's nothing wrong with ambition. But these messages can make us dismiss the value of ordinary goodness, the quiet kindness, the steady showing up, the unremarkable but genuine presence with others. Think about the work you do daily. Perhaps it seems mundane. Perhaps you dream of doing something more important, more impressive, more worthy of recognition. But what if the way you do your work matters more than what work you do? What if serving others with genuine attention, regardless of what you're serving them, is the truly important thing? Liang discovered that he had been practicing humility without knowing it. He didn't see himself as special, so he didn't treat his work as a performance. He simply showed up each day and attended to whoever came. He listened. He cared. He helped. Not to be recognized as a good person, but because this is how he believed people should be treated. The monk's observation is crucial. Most people serve with divided attention. They're physically present but mentally elsewhere. They're thinking about their next task, their problems, their own desires. They treat the people they serve as obstacles or interruptions rather than as the very purpose of their work. Liang was different. He was fully there. And this complete presence is actually quite rare. What would shift if you approached your ordinary work the way Liang learned to approach his? If you saw each interaction as an opportunity to practice presence, if you treated each person you encounter as deserving your full attention, if you measured the value of your day not by what you accomplished, but by how present you were with whatever you did. The humility here is profound. Liang learned to stop comparing his life to others' lives, to stop judging his worth by external measures of success, to find meaning and value in simple service. This is not settling for less. This is understanding what actually matters. Presence matters. Kindness matters. Seeing others' humanity matters. These things don't require a special position or unusual circumstances. They can be practiced anywhere, by anyone, in the midst of the most ordinary life. Let your breathing slow and deepen. Let your mind release its judgments about your own life. The comparisons, the sense that you should be doing something more important. All of that, let it go. Your simple presence here, now, breathing, resting, being. This is enough. You are enough. Not because you've accomplished anything remarkable, but because presence itself is remarkable. Being is remarkable. This moment, fully lived, is remarkable. Rest in that truth. There once lived a woman named May who was renowned as a healer. She knew herbs and remedies. She could feel the pulse and understand what the body was trying to say. People came from great distances seeking her help, and she turned no one away. Her reputation grew until she was celebrated as the greatest healer in the province. May worked tirelessly. From before dawn until late at night, people lined up outside her door. She barely rested. She barely ate. She gave everything to her healing work, and she began to take pride in her selflessness. She was not like other healers who turned away the poor or limited their hours. She was dedicated. She was compassionate. She was, she believed, truly embodying the healer's path. But May had a daughter named Lin, who was growing up largely without her mother. Lin would wait for hours to show May a drawing she had made. May would glance at it briefly while preparing medicine. Lin would want to tell her mother about something that happened at school. May would nod while calculating dosages. Lin learned that her mother's attention was always elsewhere, always with the patients who needed her. One night, Lin fell ill with a fever. It was not serious, just a common childhood sickness. but she felt miserable and wanted her mother. May was with a patient, someone who had traveled 3 days to see her. "I'll come soon," May told her daughter. An hour passed. Then 2. Lynn's fever climbed. A neighbor finally came to check on the girl and found her burning with fever, crying for her mother. The neighbor interrupted May's consultation. "Your daughter needs you," she said firmly. May felt irritation flash through her. Couldn't people see how important her work was? But she went to Lynn's bedside. In the lamplight, she saw her daughter's flushed face, saw the tears, saw the longing in her child's eyes. And for the first time in years, May really saw. "Everyone needs me," Lynn said through her fever. "But do you need me?" The words pierced May's heart. In that moment, she saw what she had done. In her pride at being the healer who helped everyone, she had neglected the person who needed her most. In her determination to be selfless in her work, she had been selfish with her daughter. In her mission to cure the province's illnesses, she had created a wound in her own child that no medicine could heal. May sent the waiting patients away. She spent the night holding Lynn, cooling her fever, singing the lullabies she had forgotten she knew. And in the morning, when Lynn's fever broke and she slept peacefully, May made a decision. She would still heal. It was her calling, her gift. But she would heal differently. She began limiting her hours. Morning and afternoon for patients, evening for her daughter. Some people complained. They had heard of the healer who helped everyone at all hours. Why was she changing? Some said she was becoming selfish. Others said she was getting old and lazy. May heard the criticism and felt the old pride wanting to defend itself. But she remembered Lynn's question, "Do you need me?" And she knew what truly mattered. She noticed something unexpected. When she worked fewer hours, she was more present with each patient. When she wasn't exhausted, she listened more carefully. When she had a life outside of healing, she brought more wisdom to her healing. She was a better healer by being less constantly available. One day, years later, a young healer came to study with May. The young woman was tireless, working day and night, never turning anyone away. May saw herself in this young healer's burning dedication. "Why do you work so much?" May asked her. "Because people need help," the young woman said. "Because I have this ability to heal. How can I rest when others suffer?" May nodded. She had said these exact words once. "Let me tell you something," May said. "The pride that looks like selflessness is still pride. When you work until you collapse to prove how dedicated you are, that is ego wearing the mask of service. When you neglect your own life to help others, that is not compassion. That is running from something." The young healer looked shocked. "But isn't sacrifice noble? Isn't it humble to put others before yourself?" "Real humility," May said, "knows that you are not so important that the world will collapse without you. Real humility knows that taking care of yourself is not selfish. It understands that you cannot pour from an empty cup. The humble healer knows her limits. The proud healer believes she has no limits." She continued, "I thought I was being selfless, but I was actually feeding my ego. I needed to be needed. I needed to be the one everyone depended on. I needed to be seen as the healer who never stopped, who helped everyone. And in that need, I abandoned my own daughter. May placed her hand on the young healer's shoulder. Learn from my mistake. Heal. Yes. Give your gift. Yes. But remember that you are human, not a deity. You need rest. You need relationships. You need a life beyond your work. This is not selfish. This is wisdom. And you will be a better healer for it. The young woman left that day confused. But over time, she began to understand. She began to notice how her exhaustion made her impatient with patience, how her lack of sleep caused her to miss subtle signs, how her isolation from normal life made it hard to understand the everyday struggles her patients faced. She began to set limits, and she became a deeper, wiser healer. May lived to see her daughter grow into a woman of great compassion and wisdom. Lynn became a healer too, but of a different kind. She taught children, and she taught them not just knowledge, but presence. She showed them that being available to those who truly need you is more important than being impressive to those who merely admire you. This story reveals a subtle form of pride that often hides in helping professions and caregiving roles. May believed she was being humble and selfless, but underneath was pride in her selflessness. She needed to be the healer who helped everyone. She needed to be indispensable. She needed to be seen as completely dedicated. This need, though disguised as service, was actually ego. Many of us fall into this trap. We help others compulsively, not purely from compassion but from a need to be needed. We sacrifice ourselves not from genuine generosity but to prove we're good people. We work ourselves to exhaustion not because the work truly requires it, but because we want to be seen as tireless. This is pride wearing the costume of service. Think about your own tendencies to help and serve. Are they coming from pure compassion? Or is there a need to be appreciated, to be seen as generous, to be needed? When someone else helps with something you usually do you feel relieved? Or do you feel a bit threatened, as if your value depends on being the one who helps? True humility knows that we are not so important that everything depends on us, that others can help too, that we have limits, and honoring those limits is wise, not selfish. That taking care of ourselves doesn't mean we don't care about others. It means we understand that we cannot serve from emptiness. May's realization that she was a better healer when she worked less is profound. We often believe that more is better. More hours worked equals more contribution. More people helped equals more value. But this isn't true. Exhausted people make mistakes. Depleted people have no wisdom to offer. Burned out people often help others as a way to avoid their own lives rather than from genuine compassion. What would change if you gave yourself permission to have limits? To say no sometimes? To take care of yourself without feeling guilty? Would this make you less valuable? Or would it make you more present, more wise, more genuinely helpful when you do serve? The humble person knows they are human, with human needs and human limits. The proud person believes they should transcend these needs. Lynn's question, "Do you need me?" cuts to the heart. May was available to everyone except the person who actually needed her most. This is a common tragedy. People who help the whole world but neglect their own families. Who give time to strangers but have none for their children. Who show compassion to clients but impatience with partners. This isn't compassion. This is avoidance disguised as service. Real service comes from wholeness, not depletion. From genuine care, not need for validation. From wisdom about limits, not pride in having none. This is the humility May learned too late for Lin's childhood, but in time to teach the next generation. The humility to be human, to have needs, to set boundaries, to live a balanced life while still offering one's gifts to the world. Breathe deeply now. Feel the weight of your body fully supported. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to be endlessly available. You don't need to sacrifice yourself to be worthy. Your simple humanity, with all its limits and needs, is enough. Rest now. Let yourself be held. Let yourself receive. This is not selfishness. This is wisdom. Rest. In a temple high in the mountains, the monks would gather each evening to chant. Their voices would rise together, creating sounds that seemed to make the very air shimmer. One evening, a renowned musician visited the temple. After listening to the chanting, he approached the abbot with barely concealed contempt. "Your monks have no training," the musician said. "They're off-key. They have no sense of rhythm. Their voices clash rather than harmonize. If you truly cared about beauty, you would train them properly." The abbot listened quietly, his face serene. "You are absolutely correct," he said. "They have no musical training. Many cannot carry a tune. Some are tone deaf." The musician waited for the abbot to continue, to defend the practice or explain. But the abbot simply smiled and said nothing more. "Then why?" the musician demanded. "Do you allow them to chant? Why subject the Buddha's teachings to such poor musicianship?" The abbot gestured for the musician to sit. They sat together in silence as the evening darkened into night. After a long while, the abbot spoke. "Tomorrow evening, listen again. But this time, listen not for technical skill. Listen for something else." The next evening, the musician returned, prepared to prove his point. The monks began to chant. He heard every mistake, every flat note, every missed rhythm. But then something shifted in his attention. He noticed the young monk whose voice cracked with emotion when chanting verses about compassion. He noticed the old monk whose frail voice shook but continued anyway, each word an offering. He noticed how the monks supported each other, the stronger voices making space for the weaker, never showing off, never competing. He noticed the complete sincerity in their chanting, as if each word mattered more than anything else in the world. When the chanting ended, the musician sat in stunned silence. The abbot waited. "I was listening for musical perfection," the musician finally said. "But they were offering something else entirely, weren't they?" "Yes," the abbot said. "They offered their whole hearts. A perfect voice, offered with a divided heart, creates beautiful sounds, but no transformation. An imperfect voice, offered with complete presence, touches something deeper than the ear." The musician's eyes filled with tears. "I have spent my life perfecting my technique," he said. "I can sing with flawless precision, but I have forgotten why music exists. I have forgotten that the point is not technical perfection but genuine expression. My beautiful singing is empty compared to their sincere chanting." The abbot placed a hand on his shoulder. "Your training is valuable. Your skill is a gift. But humility means understanding that perfection of technique is not the highest goal. Connection is the highest goal. Sincerity is the highest goal. The willingness to offer what you have, even if it's imperfect, is more valuable than perfect technique offered with a closed heart. The musician stayed at the temple for many months. He learned to chant with the monks. His voice was beautiful, technically far superior to theirs. But it took him a long time to learn to chant with the same open-hearted sincerity they possessed naturally. His expertise kept getting in the way. He would focus on hitting the right notes instead of offering the prayer. He would think about how he sounded instead of being present with the meaning. Slowly, painfully, he learned to let go of perfection, to allow his voice to serve the chanting rather than trying to make the chanting showcase his voice. To be one voice among many rather than the best voice. To value sincerity over skill. When he finally left the temple, he was a different musician. His technique was unchanged. But now he sang to connect rather than to impress. To express rather than to perform. To offer something real rather than something perfect. His audiences noticed the difference. Some preferred his earlier work, which was technically more impressive, but others felt moved in ways they couldn't explain. His music had become a genuine offering rather than a demonstration of skill. He had learned humility not by becoming less skilled, but by understanding that skill serves something greater than itself. This story teaches us about the humility that comes from valuing sincerity over perfection. The musician had fallen into a trap common to experts in any field. He had become so focused on technical excellence that he had lost touch with the purpose behind the technique. He had confused mastery of craft with mastery of art. The monks, with all their musical imperfections, understood something the musician had forgotten. That the point of chanting is not to create beautiful sounds but to offer sincere prayer. That presence matters more than perfection. How many people stop creating, stop expressing, stop participating because they know they're not expert enough? How much genuine human connection do we sacrifice on the altar of professionalism and perfection? The musician's beautiful voice was a gift, but it only became truly valuable when he learned to offer it humbly, in service of connection rather than in demonstration of skill. His expertise only became wisdom when paired with understanding of what the expertise was meant to serve. This is true in any field. Technical skill matters, but skill without heart, expertise without purpose, perfection without presence is ultimately empty. Do you perform rather than participate? Always trying to look good rather than be genuine? The musician's transformation required him to value something he had previously dismissed. The monk's imperfect but heartfelt chanting had more real value than his perfect but empty singing. This doesn't mean technique doesn't matter. It means technique serves purpose rather than purpose serving technique. The monks would have chanted better with training, but lack of training didn't prevent them from chanting sincerely. How many sincere but imperfect offerings do we dismiss because they don't meet our standards? How many people stop creating, stop expressing, stop participating because they know they're not expert enough? How much genuine human connection do we sacrifice on the altar of professionalism and perfection? The musician's beautiful voice was a gift, but it only became truly valuable when he learned to offer it humbly, in service of connection rather than in demonstration of skill. His expertise only became wisdom when paired with understanding of what the expertise was meant to serve. This is true in any field. Technical skill matters, but skill without heart, expertise without purpose, perfection without presence is ultimately empty. What would shift if you valued sincerity over perfection in your own life? if you offered what you have, even if it's imperfect, if you participated even when you're not expert, if you created even when you can't do it perfectly, this is not lowering standards. This is understanding what standards actually matter. Perfect technique with a closed heart creates nothing of real value. Imperfect technique with an open heart touches something deep and true. Breathe softly now. Let go of needing to be perfect. Your imperfect presence here is enough. Your sincere effort to rest is more valuable than perfect sleep performed for an audience. Just be. Just breathe. Just offer this moment your whole attention, even if your attention wanders. This sincere effort, this humble offering of yourself as you are, not as you wish you were. This is enough. This is everything. Rest now in your beautiful imperfection. We have walked together through these stories of humility and modesty. Stories of cups that need emptying, of monks who learned from dishes, of potters choosing service over fame, of teachers discovering that presence matters more than words, of scholars learning from those they dismissed, of officials recognizing that position doesn't equal worth, of artists finding freedom in impermanence, of merchants understanding that ordinary work done with extraordinary care is sacred. Through each story, a pattern emerges. Humility is not self-deprecation. It's not thinking you're worthless. It's freedom from the need to prove your worth. It's the wisdom to learn from everyone, the courage to be ordinary, the strength to serve without recognition, the grace to offer what you have without needing it to be perfect. These teachings are ancient, yet they speak to challenges we face today. In a world that constantly asks us to distinguish ourselves, to stand out, to be special, humility offers a different path. Not the path of becoming small, but the path of being exactly who we are without inflation or deflation. Just human, just here, just learning, just serving, just being. Let these stories work on you as you sleep. You don't need to remember them all. Their essence will settle into your bones, into your heart, into the quiet places where real transformation happens. Tomorrow you may notice small shifts. A little more patience with others, a little less need to defend yourself, a little more willingness to learn from unexpected teachers. This is how wisdom works. Gently, gradually, like water shaping stone. If this journey brought you peace, please consider subscribing to this channel. Your support helps these ancient teachings reach other hearts that need them. Share this with someone who might need to hear that they don't have to be extraordinary to be valuable. That presence is more important than perfection. That humble service changes the world more than grand gestures. Rest now deeply. You are enough exactly as you are. Not because you've achieved anything remarkable tonight, but because your simple presence, your sincere effort to learn, your humble willingness to be changed by these teachings, all of this is enough. You don't need to be special to be worthy. You just need to be here, breathing, being, offering what you have with an open heart. May you sleep without effort. May you wake gently. May humility become not something you practice, but something you are. May you lower yourself enough to see everyone clearly. May you empty your cup enough to taste the tea. May you serve so humbly that you forget you're serving. May you be so present that presence itself becomes your prayer. Sleep well, dear friend. The world needs your humble heart more than it needs your perfect performance. Rest in that truth. Good night.